Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Friends, today, 23rd July 2022, we will look at the Satipatthana Sutta introduction. Now, I'm going to read the first part of the sutta that is given in Pali, and then I'll give you the translation of it in English. Ekayano ayang bhikkhave maggo sattanang visuddhya soka paridevanang samatikkamaya dukkha domanassanang attangamaya nyayassa adhigamaya nibbanassa satchikiriyaya yadidang chattaru satipatthana. Now, when I read this also, you might have just got a slight understanding of it, right? So, now this is the meaning of it in English. Because this is the direct path for the purification of beings. Now, that's the first one. For the purification of beings. For the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, that is to get rid of, to abandon sorrow and lamentation. For the disappearance of pain and grief. For the attainment of the true method, that is the Noble Eightfold Path. How to practice the Noble Eightfold Path. For the realization of Nibbana, namely the 4 establishments of mindfulness, right? Now, that is the meaning of what I read just now. Now, friends, let us see what I have just now said in more detail, right? Now, let us take them like this. Ekayano maggo. Ekayano maggo, that means the direct path, right? Ekayano maggo shows which path an individual, an individual means anybody, right? like any of us, an individual takes or practices, so that the way one conducts oneself will lead one to a particular destination, right? That is, when you practice this path properly, not just, by fits and start. Now, today you start, then a week after you again start, not like that. But when you, go on practicing, then what happens is that path will lead you to a particular destination, to one particular destination. And this goes only one way to the goal of realization. That is, you can realize the spiritual path. Maybe you can attain stream entry, right? So that what it means is Nibbana, right? You can't straight away attain Nibbana. Maybe you can attain stream entry, which is a great thing, right? So the commentary to this sutta says, 1, it's a direct path, as I said before, right? It is a direct path. Then number 2, a path that has to be traveled by oneself alone. You can't hold hands with your spouse or your children and go. You have to go alone. So remember, when you go alone, that is the way to go. Then 3, it's a path taught by the One. One means with a capital O. That is the Buddha. It's a path taught by the Buddha. 4, it's a path that is only found in this Dhamma of the Buddha. You don't find it in any other religion, right? 5, it leads to Nibbana. That's why it's called the direct way or the one way. Right now, that is the meaning of Ekayano Maggo. Now let's take the next word. That is Sattanang Visuddhya. Sattanang Visuddhya. Now, Sattanang Visuddhya means this. The Buddha says that through mental taints, men means women also, men become impure through mental taints. By going and touching some excreta, you might spoil your hand. But when you spoil your mind, you don't even know sometimes. So Buddha says, through mental taints, men become impure. And through the cleansing of the mind, they become pure. So this is the way to clean your mind of all the, unnecessary little things that we are keeping in our mind. So here, purification of beings means not a physical one. It does not mean a physical, not the body, but the mental purification by the practice of virtue and wholesome, skillful qualities. Now, you know that even socially, we when just think of the social atmosphere, there are good things to do and bad things to do, right? Even that means that they are skillful when you do good things. So in spiritual things, there are good things to do that will bring you happiness, and the opposite that will bring you unhappiness, right? So people are not free, for they are subject to hate, lust, and ignorance. These are the 3 things that very often, make our mind impure. Maybe not all 3, maybe one of them perhaps, maybe ignorance, right? Virtuous behavior wipes out hate. Now, how do you get rid of hate? By virtuous behavior. Then, the calm and peace of concentration, that is samadhi, casts out lust. Now, when you get concentrated, when you get into samadhi, the lustful things that come into the mind do not come anymore. Maybe after you finish your meditation, they might come back again, but they will be weakened, right? So like that, we have to get rid of them gradually. So, and wise understanding of the reality of one's inner world drives away ignorance. Now, when you think of ignorance, what it means really is not knowing the 4 noble truths, right? But at the same time, ignorance is also not knowing what's in your mind. Now, if you just get angry about things and then you start shouting and, or you see someone and you think, oh, that person is not as nice as me, or that person is much more, much better than me, looks, right? So these are things that come into your mind because of ignorance. So now this is the inner world, because you're not going to say it. You're not going to say anything about it, but it is the inner world. So we have to see the reality of the inner world. Then when you see, there you are. This thought has come into my mind, or this emotion has come into my mind. So when you see that, you get rid of it. That is how you purify the mind. All this is possible when one is mindful, and it grants full inner freedom. So to get free, don't think you are free just because you you have a home, and you have a job, and you have enough money and all that. That is not freedom. Freedom is to have a good inner freedom, right? Usually people are negligent because their mind is wandering. Where? In the six sense pleasures. The six sense pleasures, that is the senses, eyes, ears, nose, the six senses, them. So very often the mind is wandering in these six senses. Therefore, what happens? You become negligent. So, and these senses, the mind wanders in the senses to find pleasure out of the senses, right? And the external world. We are always interacting with the external world, so that they do not have right view. So now that is why people don't have right view. So now you know that in the Noble Eightfold Path, right view is the first one, right? So the first factor. They neglect their duties. Then when that happens, they neglect their duties. And their minds are always in conflict. The mind is in conflict, not with anybody else, but within the mind, in the ideas and concepts, the mind is always in conflict and muddled, like tangled. These shortcomings may lead to wrong judgments and vague and unsettled thoughts. See, when your mind is not clear and clean and pure, and always your mind is having a lot of thoughts, and all this is, trying to come up every time, there are conflicts. Then what happens is you don't know what you are doing, and you get vague, and your thoughts are not clear. Mindfulness is the controlling factor in all such cases, for it produces clear thoughts. Now, when you're mindful, what it means is you're mindful of your mind and body, not mindful of the outer thing, right? Not that you do. Now, supposing you are looking at something, you can see it. That's a different thing. But remember, you are looking at it with your eyes, and that is the mindfulness that you must have, right? So now, so it makes one's ideas and thoughts clear, so that you don't think of other things. You are looking at something, or you are hearing something, or you are reading something. That's what your mind is taking in, not other things, right? You hear sound when you are reading something. Don't go behind the sound. Just concentrate on the reading. So now, like that, you see, this mindfulness produces clear thoughts, sound judgment. Now, when you have mindfulness, you won't go wrong in your judgment, whether it's about you or whether it's about others. Then also you have a clear outlook on life. Okay. Now that is about what we just now read. I told you it is about Sattanang Visuddhya, purification of beings. Now the next one is Soka Paridevanang Samatikkamaya. Now that is for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation. Now, when do we come into this kind of situation? When we lose somebody, or when we lose something, maybe our wealth or possessions or, some such thing, then there is sorrow and lamentation. When sadness due to an emotional disturbance occur, an emotional disturbance means now, supposing something that you never expected happens, something, negative, something that brings suffering to you, that brings unsatisfactoriness and sadness to you, something when that such a thing happens, then if we suffer from it, right, and cry and lament, we would lose control. We would lose control of our mind and body. We would lose control of ourselves. But if we have practiced mindfulness, we would look for the cause. Now, why am I crying? Why am I lamenting? Why am I being, so sad and so suffering so much about what happened? Now if it is somebody's death, just taking just an example. So if it's somebody's death, after all, when you are born, you know that you're going to die. The way you die is, after all, from the karma that you have done earlier and the karma that you have done in this birth, right? Both things, our past karma as well as the present karma, come together to make our death whatever it is. It may be a very peaceful death, like I told you the last time we did, a very good friend of ours passed away. His death was very calm and peaceful because his life was all, very calm and pleasant. So his death also was like that. So that is why we must live accordingly. We must be mindful. So then we have to look for the cause. Now, when we find that our mind is getting unsettled or sad or something, we must look for the cause and understand it and try to find how we could face it equanimously. We must, we are human beings after all. We have a certain power, and that power we must use positively in order to get rid of these things, not to give in to these things, right? So therefore, when we have some kind of heartache or suffering due to some kind of sad happening, you must look for the cause, understand it, and then try to find a way to face it equanimously. When we look for the cause or reason for an unhappiness, we would realize, now we come to the cause, right? We would realize that it is due to attachment. It's nothing else. It is due to attachment to a person, position. Now say you lose your job. Now that is the position, right? You lose your job. Now the attachment to that position makes you, very, very sad, and you lament and you cry and, all that. So the attachment to a person, to a position, to a place, maybe you are in a certain place and you have to leave that place, right? Or thing. It may be a thing, like some kind of position. If we ask ourselves, why am I attached to this object? Whatever the object, it may be a person, it may be a thing. We'll see it's due to craving and ignorance. These are the two things that govern our thought. Craving, ignorance. Of not thinking wisely. That is, now, how do you think wisely? This object is impermanent, right? Even if it is a diamond, one day it is going to, get destroyed or whatever it is. So therefore, we have to know whatever the object, whether it's a person or a place or a thing, it is impermanent, anicca. And I look for lasting happiness and security, which I'll never get, right? So when I look for lasting happiness through this object, whatever the object, then only that I get the negative aspect of it. If otherwise, I will be able to face it equanimously, yeah, that is it. I am also going to be finished, very in a few years or something. So like that, you put it across to yourself and see the impermanence. Whenever you come across anything, try to look for the impermanence. Now, even if you look at a lovely flower, now what we do now is we look at the flower and think, oh, the beauty of it. Now you remember Keats, how he said, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. But he didn't look for the impermanence because he didn't know Buddhism, I suppose. So now we know that lovely flower, however beautiful it is, in a few days, it will wilt and die. So that is the nature of things. So we have to understand that, right? Sometimes we share the suffering of others, right? And shed tears. But if we think of how Buddha looked at the suffering in the world. Now, Buddha saw all the people suffering, right? But he didn't cry, right? And he looked at it with equanimity. We would be encouraged to follow his example. If we are really true Buddhists, we should always think of the Buddha. How did he face the situations that he faced? When Visakha, who was the Buddha's foremost female lay disciple, one day, I think all of you know Visakha. I mean, you have heard of her, right? She was a very loyal and very good practitioner, right? But still, one day she came to visit the Buddha with wet hair as a mourning for the death of her beloved grandchild. And what did the Buddha say? There is a big story. I didn't take all those things. The Buddha consoled her by showing how futile it is to mourn for the dead. For when there is birth, there will be death too. From an emotional balance, we could see that it is already a past experience that we bring up into the present. Now that is done, finished and done with. But we bring it to the present and we create thoughts about it and suffer, right? So we cannot change it. Can we change that whatever has happened? No. Now Visakha couldn't bring back the child, right? We have no control over events. This training to face reality is another service of mindfulness. The Buddha says, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, now these are a few lines from a big poem, by giving up the things of the past, not thinking of the future. What is past and future you don't grasp, you will be one who wanders forth serene. You will always be serene. Now you know how the Buddha's the Buddha has a smile on his face. On every statue you will see that smile. Now that smile, that it's an enigmatic smile, as if he's not smiling at the sorrows of others. He's smiling at how he sees these things, right? With equanimity. That's why, right? The next factor, now we have gone through the other factor, that is the Soka Paridevana Samatikkamaya. Now we come to the next factor, Dukkha Domanassa Attangamaya. That is for the disappearance of pain and grief. Pain, grief, and despair last longer than sorrow and lamentation because it's more difficult to overcome them. Even meditators find difficulty in overcoming this. The same methods as for sorrow and lamentation could be used to get rid of pain and grief. It is very difficult for people who are used to always think of their own mind and body and the external world, the external world around us, mentally as one compact system. That tree is there. It has been there for 10 years. It is there. I have been here for 20 years. So I will be continue for another 20 years. So the compactness of things we think, right? Mentally. So because of that, like as if it is an inseparable unit to get rid of. You see, we cannot get rid of this false idea of fullness, completeness, or compactness. Now, even our body, you know what it is, full of small atoms, right? So people fail to see things as processes. Now, our body is also a process, the blood going, flowing in, and then all the other things that happen, the digestion, everything, right? Processes or movements. And they will never understand if we don't realize this as a process. We will never understand anatta or no self. Now, that is one of the things that I think we have to, try to understand. Buddha tells Patachara. Now, Patachara is another, she became monastic later, but I think you know the story. I don't want to tell you the story now. But Patachara, when Buddha, she came across, Buddha, the Buddha said, now this Patachara, when she came to the Buddha, she was overwhelmed with pain, grief, and despair at the loss of her whole family, including husband, children, parents, and brother. Everyone that she could call her own, everyone had died. Now just imagine that. Now when we lose one person, we cry and, we make a lot of, and we go on and on thinking and suffering. But here Patachara lost everyone that she could say was her own family. And then what did the Buddha say? For one who is by death oppressed, there is no safety seen in children, father, and friend, or others close to one. A shelter true. There is no shelter from any of these people. Amongst one's kinsfolk, one will never find a refuge among one's kinsfolk. At the end of the Gatha, Patachara attained stream entry. Now you might think, how did that happen? But you see, she was a very, very, pure and very good practitioner before. before even, not before that birth, so that she had a lot of good parami. So anyway, as Patachara realized that all past experiences were behind her. You see, if we go on thinking about all the past things that happened, all the bad things that happened to a negative things that happened to us, we will never be able to get rid of those thoughts. So, and nothing that was in the present could bring satisfaction forever. Now, that these are the two things that are very important. We cannot bring back the past now to this here, and nothing in this present, the things that are here in the present, nothing will give us full satisfaction. And everyone she held dear was bound to vanish forever. And these changes were beyond her control. We too should consider that our despair or pain or grief is a dependent arising. Now, what is dependent arising? There is a sutta, called dependent origination. That is dependent on one, another comes. That is dependent on avidya paccha sankhara. Dependent on ignorance comes sankhara. Sankhara paccha vijnanam. Dependent on sankhara comes vijnana or consciousness. Now, like that, one is dependent on the other. So that is why it's called dependent arising, right? So we have to see that this is because of that. It remains while the causes and conditions remain and then disappear. When we use mindfulness to train the mind to accept this reality, these emotions too slowly fade away. We won't need to, go back to these things and try to keep these emotions fresh, right? Now that is about this next one, that is Sukha Parideva, Dukkha Domanassa. Now we come to the next one, Nyayasa Adhigamaya. Nyayasa Adhigamaya. That is for reaching the right path towards liberation. What is the right path? The Noble Eightfold Path. So, that there are two ways of doing it, mundane and spiritually. So, first we have to start with the mundane training. As lay people, you can follow the Noble Eightfold Path. So, the fourth reason for practicing mindfulness is to follow the Noble Eightfold Path, which the Buddha shows as the one way to freedom from sorrow, lamentation, grief, and despair. If we follow the Noble Eightfold Path, we will not be, suffering. These 8 steps lead us to right understanding, right thinking, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration or samadhi. The role of Satipatthana is to keep the mind duly focused in things that will give it guidance in what present event to develop. Now, what should we develop now? And which ones should we abandon so that one could follow the path? Before we go further, let us look at the word Satipatthana. Now, Sati means mindfulness. Upattana means establishing. The act of attending to each situation or experience and being aware as it happens. Now, can you see? Now, when you are doing something, you see it as it happens. In the moment, fixes the mind firmly on the object. This way of looking at things, at anything, is what is called knowing as it is, or seeing the reality. It is also called yata bhuta jnana dassana in Pali. It is the purpose of Buddhism to reunite one with the reality one has lost due to ignorance. In looking for happiness in places and things where it is not found, that is, in the shadows and illusions of the mind. We get all this suffering because of our mind, not the body. Mindfulness helps to keep the mind clean and free of emotional stimulants. The unreality of I, me, mine, that is the self, concepts are visible to one through the eye of mindfulness. And then most of the mental illnesses and distress will go away. Only by an inner change will there be an outer change. When the individual is confused, the social environment where he or she associates will also be confused. The Buddha's message teaches us three things. That is, to know the mind, to shape the mind or change the mind, and to liberate it. Now, some people don't want to change the mind, to keep it just as it is, right? How can we know the mind? If we are able to become aware of things with just bare attention. I will discuss it later in another, next talk. We will perceive something without reaction by speech, thought, or action. This seeing may be incomplete or even faulty. If one is mindfully noting, one will see anicca or impermanence in everything we come across. How do we shape the mind? A great part of our suffering comes from our ignorance, thoughtlessness, rashness, and lack of self-control. The importance of bare attention is that it shows our reaction to whatever. Quite often, thoughts of past and future try to shape our mind. This can be stopped by mindfully attending to the situation. How can we liberate the mind? One way is to take a step back from things and people and allow a certain amount of space to enter between the incident and one's reaction. This will prevent one from interfering with desire or aversion or self-importance. Very often, why do we start talking about ourselves? Because of self-importance. This self-importance will weaken so that the karma that we might have collected too may end. Thus, we have no suffering. We will be able to see our own desires, aversion, and delusion too. Liberation of the mind is the goal of mindfulness. The Buddha has shown that mindfulness has to be practiced in 4 ways. Now he says, Katame chattaro. Ida bhikkave bhikkhu kaye kayanupassi viharati. Atapi sampajano tatima vineyya loke abijja domanassang. Vedanasu Vedananupassi Viharati. Atapi Sampajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhijjado Manassang. Chitte Chittanupassi Viharati. Atapi Sampajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhijjado Manassang. Dhammesu Dhammanupassi Viharati. Atapi Sampajano Satima Vinaya Loke Abhijjado Manassang. What for? Now this is the translation. What for? Chatta katame chattaro. What for? Here bhikkhus, a bhikkhu dwells contemplating the body, ardent, clearly comprehending, mindful, having subdued longing and grief for the world. He dwells contemplating feelings in feelings. Again, in the same way. He dwells contemplating mind in body, mind in mind, in the same way. He dwells contemplating phenomena, that is mental factors, in phenomena in the same way. Now, this is the first contemplation to be done is mindfulness of the body. Buddha says it has to be done by contemplating the body in the body. The Buddha gives 4 mental qualities as essential for this contemplation. What are these 4? Now, this is the first one, Atapi. The first one means, that is Atapi means, one should be diligent. Atapi Sampajano Satima, right? This is a special kind of effort. One that can subdue the mind of the defilements. Our body becomes the anchor to stop the mind that wanders everywhere. Atapi or effort tries to maintain the mind in one place or the present moment and would not allow it to give up this task. For continuity in the practice is very important. This diligence, Atapi, is a balanced quality which supports this energy. It's like the tuning of a lute or violin, where the strings should be not too tight and not too loose. Next is Sampajano, or clearly knowing. When one utters a falsehood or when one becomes aware of the impermanent nature of feelings, thoughts, etc., one could transform one's unwholesome thoughts, etc., to wholesome ones. Sampajana in practice can lead to the development of wisdom, so that starting from seeing the form of the breath, the quality of the breath, etc., and the posture when you are seated or whatever in the posture is, one may also recognize when a fetter arises. There are 10 fetters, Sangyojana, right? So when they arise, you see it. Thus increasing the penetrative understanding needed for attaining higher states of purification. It's only when you see that you can improve yourself. Now we come to the next, that is sati or mindfulness. Earlier it was defined as memory, but now as the faculty that helps and provides the opportunity for memory to function. It's not memory itself, but it helps the memory to function. It is awareness of the present moment and a teaching of self-reliance. Self-reliance, to rely on yourself, not on others. It starts with attention to the little tasks, little activities of everyday life. This relieves suffering and improves the condition of the mind. Buddha says, Ananda, be you islands unto yourselves, a refuge unto yourselves. Next is Vinaya loke abhijja domanassang, having subdued longing and grief for the world. Here, world means one's body and mind. This means to see whatever comes within your vision, hearing, or any of the senses. Know it without delusion, aversion, or attachment. The Buddha says, in this very body, a fathom long, with its consciousness and perception, I declare the world, its arising, cessation, and the path that leads to its cessation. The advice is to take the body as an island for us to stay in the present and not to create stories about it, for they make us suffer. I'll enlarge on the stories next time. Now, let us turn to clear comprehension, which is of four kinds. That is of purpose, of suitability, of domain, and reality. When one has a purpose, whether mundane or spiritual, it becomes a strong inner center for all human activities. See? To have a purpose in whatever you do. It also gives the mind a leadership to choose correctly and not give in to the persuasion of others. Then suitability means, especially in the case of a monastic, whether one's actions, conduct, speech, and thoughts are appropriate, in keeping with the discipline, that is self-restraint. Then domain means, the Buddha says that the domain of the monk or nun is in the four foundations of mindfulness, which means that a monastic must be extra mindful of one's object or one's subject of meditation. It's best to practice in such a way so that life and meditation are merged. For example, eating, contemplating on impermanence of the body, the four elements, etc. It is good for lay people too. Clear comprehension of reality goes beyond the body and beyond body reflection. All humanity is deluded by the thought of I, me, mine, you, etc. Rebirth and suffering are the results of this attachment to a self. If we can keep in mind that within there is no self, now this is something that you can remember also. Within there is no self that acts, and outside there is no self affected by the action. When doing great things or minor things in ordinary life, we may be able to understand Buddha's doctrine of anatta. This is what is meant by sunyata. Thank you. I have done, I have tried my best to make it short, but still it took much more time than I wanted. I only hope that you all got it, So next time I hope to take some of the words that, might have sort of confused you. Now, like sunyata, for instance, or self. I want to take some of these words and then explain it further. That's what I'm going to do next time. So there is a little more time. Would you like to do a little bit of meditation?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So today I'm going to do the scanning of the body, because we have been thinking of this body and mind, right? So let us do the scanning of the body, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible. So sit down properly, that is with your body straight, the upper part of the body especially straight, so that your mind does not wander, and you can, establish yourself, as we have done now, as we have learned today, in the four fine foundations of mindfulness, right? So now take a few deep breaths. And now, if you like, please close your eyes and focus your mind on the head, the top of your head. See all the sensations that you can feel at the top of your head. What sensations do you feel? Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, whatever sensations you may feel. Now take your mind to the sides of your head. Again, feel all the sensations that you can feel there. Go to the back of your head. Now come back to your forehead. You will feel the air more clearly at the forehead, because there is no cover there like on your head. So you'll feel the air touching your forehead. Then go down to the cheeks, lips. See the eyes. Your eyes are closed, but still you can see. You can see. Then you come to the lips. You can go inside the tongue, the teeth, the saliva. All these are things that you can feel. Now go down to the neck. Still you can feel the air on your neck, the sensations there. Try to keep your head straight with the neck and the spine. Go down further to the chest. Feel the chest rising and falling. See the arms. Depending on how you keep your hands, your arms, how they are hanging from your shoulders, bent maybe at the elbows, then the hands, the fingers, maybe they are tingling, you feel that. Now come back to the chest, go down to the abdomen, see the rising and falling of the abdomen when the air enters and goes out. That is the rise and fall, the impermanence. Now go back to the back of your body, that is the spine, the shoulder blades, go down further, the buttocks. Then you come to the thighs. Maybe you're keeping your hands on your thighs and you feel the weight Then if your legs are crossed, you will again see that the knees are bent and the forelegs go to the feet, the toes. Now have a very good look at the sitting body, sitting, sitting, sitting. Now come back to the nose and see how the air goes in and out. Have a very good look at it and see the quality of the air that goes in and the air that comes out. Is there a difference? It was a very short meditation because I took a long time to give you the talk. I'm sorry about it. Anyway, let's meet in another 2 weeks, maybe. Right? So,
Thank you.